Hello, and welcome to the AT&T Super League of Sweetness Week 2 video recap. Of course, it's me, your commissioner, and your champion, Super Keith. Of course, these videos we go over games that happen, player stats, upcoming matchups, and other points of interest. So as usual, let's get into it. Start with my team. McGiblet's Funhouse taking on Adrian's Blue Nightmare. At kickoff, I was projected to get the win by 4 points, and it didn't happen that way for me. I lost 91 to 116 for a 25-point loss there. It hurt. I wasn't happy about that. Adrian won with 6 of his 10 players missing projection. He did have good play from running back Adam Jones, one of the Joneses, I don't know, 22 points, almost doubling his projection. And wide receiver Ross putting up 19 points to also double his projection. He did have a wide receiver on the bench, which would have only net 2 additional points, but he whooped me by enough. My team crashed and burned this week. I had 8 of my 10 players miss projection. I only had two guys hit projection, both running backs. Ezekiel Elliott putting up 19 points, beating projection by almost 4 points. And Matt Breida, the running back from San Francisco, putting up 14 points to beat his projection by 2. I did have a running back and a wide receiver on my bench, which would have net me almost 19 more points, but not enough for the win. So with that, I go to 1-1, and Adrian gets the win on there. The next game was Big Shell's team. Sheldon taking on Eric's 100 yards and running. At projection, Sheldon was projected to get that win by 8 points. Ended up being much more than that, 113 to 79 for 34 points. And folks, that brings us to our first award right there. The biggest blowout, 34 points was the largest win margin this week. So Sheldon's team was a dominating win. He had half his team hit projection. Quarterback Matt Ryan, Matty Ice, 31 points, beating projection by 2. Of course, who's he throwing to? His wide receiver Julio Jones, 25 points, beating projection by almost 10. Now, there was a defense and a running back combination, which would have net 5 points. They increased that lead, but he didn't really need it. Eric also had 8 of his 10 players miss projection, but wide receiver Brandon Cooks almost 14 points, beating projection by 3, and running back David Montgomery almost 13 points, beating his projection by almost 5. 26 points left on the bench between a different quarterback and a tight end, but again, not enough for that win. Moving on to the next game, we had Chuck's team taking on Liz's Captain Rocks. At projection, Liz was projected to get that win by 6, but it did not go down that way. Chuck's team got the win, 132 to 114 for an 18-point win difference, and that gets me to another award. The highest score this week goes to Chuck's team, 132 points. On that, he had half his team hit projection. Quarterback Russell Wilson, 33.5 points, beating projection by almost 8. Running back Dalvin Cook, 27 points, beating his projection by 12. Only 6.5 points left on the bench from a wide receiver on that, though. Now, Liz did also have half her team hit projection. They didn't do too bad. Wide receiver Kenny Galladay, almost 19 points, beating his projection by almost 9. Running back Austin Eckler, still doing good with Melvin Gordon out. 17 points, beating projection by 4. There was 7 points left on the bench by Liz's tight end, but it wouldn't have been enough for the win on that here. So moving on to the next game, we had Michael's team Dub taking on Rob's Kardashians. 112 to 124 was the projected. Rob being the underdog. No, Michael being the underdog with Dub, and it turned it around, 124 to 109 for a 15-point upset win for Dub. He had half his team hit projection. Patrick Mahomes, 47 points, beating projection by 13. Wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr. from the Monday night game, 25 points, beating projection by almost 12. There was a wide receiver on the bench, which would have net an additional 13.5 points. Now, Rob's team, not quite as good. 6 of 10 missing projections. He only had 4 people hit. Running back Saquon Barkley, 20.5 points, beating his projection by 2. Tight end Travis Kelce, almost 18 points, beating projection by 4. Only a wide receiver on a bench would have net him almost 4 more points. Going on to the next game, we have Jaquan's Space Monkeys taking on Jody's mama and her boy. The Space Monkeys had a 20-point projected win difference. This was projected to be the biggest blowout. Ended up being 119 to 108 for an 11-point win for the Space Monkeys. He got the win despite 8 of his 10 players missing projection, but he chose the defense, taking on the terrible Dolphins. So he had New England. They put up 37 points. It sounds funny to say a defense. 37 points, almost tripling their projection. Kicker Sly put up 16 points, almost doubling his projection. He did have a quarterback and a running back on a bench, which would have net almost 4 more points. Now, Jody's mama and her boy team, they had 6 of 10 players miss projection, so 4 players beat it out. Tight end Mark Andrews, the second week of excellence for him, 18 points, almost tripling his projection. Running back Nick Chubb from the Browns on the Monday night game, almost 16 points, beating his projection by 1. Now, she did have a wide receiver and a running back on the bench, which would have net an additional 14 points. And if you're watching, the 14 points they would have net was more than the 11-point loss. So that gets her a salty loss. Left the win on the bench from that running back wide receiver combo. It's tough, though, because the projections on her players, she put the right people on. They just didn't perform out there. So nothing you could do with that except take the loss. Salty deal. Now, the last game was Kim Possible taking on Mary's team at the kickoff. Kim's Possible is projected to get the win by 14, and it was slightly more than that, 104 to 87 for a 17-point win difference. She won despite 7 of her 10 players missing projection, but quarterback Jackson, almost 37 points, beating his projection by 11. Running back Hardman, 13 points to beat his projection by 6. She did have a trio of guys on the bench, running back, wide receiver, tight end, almost 24 points more that would have got. Now, Mary's team also had 7 to 10 players miss projection, but tight end Vance McDonald, 16 points almost, doubling his projection. Running back Peyton Barber, almost 15 points, doubling his projection. And only a running back on a bench would have net an additional 4 points, but not enough for the win on that again. All right, guys, so that brings us to the upcoming matchups on that. We'll have my team 1-1, Giblets Funhouse, taking on Liz's team, Captain Rocks at 1-1. The 0-2 100 yards and run will be looking for their first win against Adrian's Blue Nightmare at 1-1. The undefeated Dub, 2-0, taking on the undefeated Chucks team at 2-0. Someone's going to go 3-0 in that matchup. That's looking to be my matchup of the week right there. The 2-0 Space Monkeys taking on the 0-2 Rob's Kardashians. The 1-1 Kim Impossible taking on the 0-2 Mama and her boy. The 0-2 Mary's team taking on the 2-0 Big Shells team. So tomorrow's game will be Jacksonville versus Tennessee on the Thursday night matchup, and then the Monday night game is Chicago versus Washington. Now, today being Wednesday, the first batch of wire hit, so people's acquisitions will have swapped on through there. There was already a trade in the league this week. If you guys watched your notifications, I did have a trade. Someone needed a running back, and I could use a slightly better wide receiver. So I made that trade. Frank Gore is in a timeshare there, and he's definitely would have done better than Neiman Hines for Mama and a boy. Now Hines, of course, stash him because if something happens to Marlon Mack, he might be the number 1 go-to guy. That brings me up to an important point here. I know it's not a lot of guys are picking up, or players, not guys, players, are picking up handcuffs to their number 1 running backs or wide receivers. Well, the wide receivers, you always have 2 or 3, 4, guys on there on a team, so you don't really, but running backs are a different position. If you have a strong line, you guys putting up points, the handcuff is important to have on there. I've always been a fan of that theory. I didn't go with it this season. Because just the way the drafting stuff was going, it didn't work out for me, but a lot of times it's important to pick that up. So if you have a stud running back and you got another guy on a bench, get his handcuff on there, because if something happens, look at these quarterbacks. 2 weeks, the Jets have gone through 2 quarterbacks. Roethlisberger out for this season, Breeze out for another 6 weeks, maybe more. What's his name? Sam Darnold got mono. Quarterbacks, star players dropping like flies. Get those handcuffs, get those backups, work the waiver wire. Good luck to you guys in the upcoming weeks. I'll catch you later.